The corporate world has such an opportunity to make change and partner with governments, partner with nonprofits, partner with investors. This is a place where I feel we are making positive change.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Baker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Sustainable Ambassador Podcast. In this episode, I am extremely excited to be joined by Jeannie-Renne Malone, who's the Vice President of Global Sustainability at the VF Corporation. VF Corporation is one of the world's largest apparel, footwear, and accessory companies whose brands include Vans, the North Face, and Timberland. Jeannie, thank you very much for taking the time to join us. It's really great to have you here to hear a little about the work you're doing, but also the career path that you've been on and some advice for young professionals, aspiring ambassadors as they take on this journey.
Thank you, Rich. It's great to be here.
So as a starting point, maybe a little introduction to yourself and how you have become the VP of Global Sustainability for the brand.
Sure. Well, I always like to start with my personal purpose and how I got to be here from a personal perspective. This was truly guided by my mother and father. My mom was a bilingual kindergarten teacher who inspired me daily, and she truly demonstrated the importance of social responsibility and understanding the needs of those around us. My father, he was a world-renowned solar energy resource expert, and he taught me about the power of technology, collaboration, innovation, and policy to transform communities through renewable energy. And watching my parents dedicate their careers to improving their communities with a focus on this interconnection of social and environmental stewardship has really brought me to where I am today.
Within your career path, how did you get started? What was your education background and what were some of the first formative experiences you had?
It started out, I studied Spanish at the University of Washington, and then really took some time to travel around Latin America and see firsthand the needs that people have in different communities. And so after college, I moved out to Colorado, did a number of kind of internship opportunities, and then I landed at the National Renewable Energy Lab, where I spent many years managing the Latin America program. And that was such an exciting opportunity to address the global issues of climate change. And so after working at NREL for a while, I also went back to graduate school and studied international development with a focus on international finance mechanisms that can solve big global problems like climate change. Over time, I worked in the government, in the nonprofit, and finally landed in my last couple of jobs and as an in-house sustainability professional, which truly feel this is the place for me to drive change. I think the corporate world has such an opportunity to make change and partner with governments, partner with nonprofits, partner with investors. But really, this is a place where I feel we are making positive change.
How is corporate different than, say, the nonprofit world or the international development world? And was each one the best place for you at that time?
That's such a great question. And I think the answer is yes. At the time, in each of those roles was the best place for me, and building knowledge and expertise at every step along the way. So, working in a nonprofit really allowed me to understand that particular world. And now I have the opportunity to collaborate with nonprofits. Working for the government was extremely helpful in understanding the importance of policy and how interventions at the policy level can really drive progress. And now in the corporate world, bringing those all together, it's truly a great place for me to be today. This is an opportunity for me to bring together those different experiences, apply them in this particular role. And I think what's different is in the corporate environment, we truly have to listen to our shareholders, to investors, and to the regulatory community. And that's a lot of what's driving our strategy and our initiatives today.
So what does the VP of Global Sustainability do?
Every day I have to be resilient and adaptable to the many needs of many functions around the organization. And so what we do, and many of those of us who are in this role know that we have to have the ability to drive progress with influence and to connect with leadership internally, to connect with external stakeholders. And so there's a lot of facilitation, influencing that goes on, but it's this constant and ongoing raising awareness, educating at every level of the organization, and educating our external stakeholders what it is we're trying to achieve and why, and how that drives business value. So it's really a cross-functional opportunity and ability to drive change through influence is what's really important here.
You have a very large supply chain. You have consumers. You are in the environmental space through your brands, you have a lot that you have to be answering to, maybe, or hearing from your stakeholders that you should be doing more on. And I'm curious, how do you prioritize or how do you identify the challenges that you're going to take up this year or next year? Because you can't solve it all, obviously, right? And if you try to, you're going to solve nothing. So how do you take in all this input and then try and create a framework or prioritize the issues that you're challenged by?
Going back to our science-based targets, which really is the umbrella target across all VF functions and our brands. We took a couple of year process to collect data across our entire enterprise. And we know now that 70% of our scope 3 impacts is a result of raw material extraction, processing, and production. So therefore, focusing on sustainable raw material substitution and improving the operational efficiency of factories represents a significant opportunity to lessen our environmental impacts and key pathways to meeting our targets. So really thinking about materials to guide our efforts, we set a sustainable materials vision that our top materials shall originate from regenerative, responsibly sourced renewable or recycled sources. And we're looking at that through a couple of pathways. One is we're increasing the uptake of commercially available sustainable raw materials like recycled polyester, recycled nylon. And we're also looking at creating a captive supply of new sustainable raw materials, such as those sourced from regenerative practices. So moving from monoculture agriculture to regenerative agriculture as a means to store more carbon in the ground that is emitted into the atmosphere. So we are focused on a number of pilots around the world, sourcing rubber from regenerative practices, cotton, leather, and we really see that as a way to prioritize and to focus when we're thinking about how we are sourcing our materials.
If you were to break it down into the biggest constraints around solving this challenge, is it technical? Is it process? Is it economics? Like,
It's a little bit of all of the above. So we know that there's some materials out there already that we're able to start sourcing and designing into our products, recycled polyester and recycled nylon, for example. So availability of those types of materials is a challenge because there's a lot of other brands like us out there that have set similar targets and they're trying to source the same materials. So it's a supply and demand challenge. Now, the innovation gap is something we talk about a lot. There's likely a number of new sustainable innovations out there in the materials space that don't yet exist today, or there's a lot of materials that are just in progress of getting to market. So we test and learn on a few of these types of opportunities, but we are still waiting to truly close that innovation gap with some new sustainable materials innovations. And then finally, I think policy is a huge opportunity and currently a challenge. There aren't incentives to truly allow farmers to convert to regenerative agriculture practices around the world. That's starting to happen. We're seeing a lot of exciting regulatory movement, especially out of the EU, but there's a lot that yet still needs to happen.
How do you approach these large challenges and kind of developing a plan of attack? You're like everybody else. You see the world and where it's going. You see the 1.5 getting closer. You're in the seat where you have the ability to bring together resources and people and make these incremental or maybe sometimes disruptive gains. How do you approach that at the personal level so you can go into the office and get as much done as possible?
Everybody in the organization has a role to play to moving toward our sustainability targets. And we spend time, building awareness, raising awareness, the educational piece, all backed by data to show what we need to be doing to work toward our goals. But then personally, what gives me inspiration is to see the progress. We're starting to see our brands source sustainable materials into our products on a very large basis. The North Face, for example, almost 80% of their materials are recycled. And so that's exciting to see. Earlier this year, 3 of our brands, the North Face, Vans, and Timberland, started sourcing this regenerative natural rubber into their products. And so this pilot that we started on a very small scale in Thailand, in partnership with a cooperative and an on-the-ground partner named Terra who helped educate the farmers, now has turned into a really exciting project that has spread to more cooperatives and really allows us to source all of this regenerative sourced rubber from Thailand from a project that we helped start. So it's really exciting to see those
Yeah.
small instances and examples grow as our projects grow.
How long has this taken to come to kind of where it is now? Like, how many years have you got invested? And when you were starting this, how did it come to you, and how did you create the buy-in internally to make that investment?
So going back to data, we knew that we had to start looking at regenerative sourced materials to
Mhm.
work toward our science-based targets. So we looked across our top 9 materials, and rubber being one of our top 9. We decided to partner with an organization called Terra, who already had established relationships with farmers in Thailand, and really start working toward an
Mhm.
offer for, I guess, working toward a program that we could then source rubber from in the future. So about 2 years ago is when this all started. We
Okay.
paid for an investment to help that education, that transformation. And I was able to go to Thailand at the very beginning of the project and see the kind of the before state and see the many of these farms that were truly monoculture, so just rubber laid out in a line. And then fast forward 2 years, and I was able to go back and see the progress that had been made. And so this very small investment that we started has truly grown into a, back to my personal passion around that interconnection of
Right.
social responsibility and environmental stewardship. So it took a couple of years to get there. We're super excited to see where we are today. And I think the most exciting part is just to really have that engagement with the farmers themselves and understand how this has really benefited their lives.
But your supply chain team is thinking, wait a second, we went to monoculture to make this all, linear in terms of the cost function, in terms of quality, in terms of stability of supply. How do you make sure that people internally are either they understand the benefits as you see them, or that you can help them overcome some of the challenges that might actually be presented if the whole country of Thailand went to regen?
We have a very close partnership with our supply chain operations and overall supply chain functions. So our global materials supply team is very aware of the work that we're doing, and we work collaboratively with our material supply teams as well as with the brands to understand what are the
Yeah.
brands wanting to design into their products. How do we convert to sustainable material substitutions over time? And so it's very much a collaboration, and also really helping all of our functions understand that there is this regulatory pressure that's starting to move in. And so, especially what we're seeing in Europe over
Mhm.
time, the way that we design, manufacture, and ship our products are going to be incredibly influenced by the sustainability focused regulation that's coming out.
Yeah.
So we're preparing today in collaboration with many of our teams and function leaders for what we know in the future we'll need to be doing from a compliance perspective.
When these policies come out, are you like, hey guys, everybody, company wide email sending this out just to make it easier for yourself? Or how do you make sure that people understand everything that's coming through? Because I mean, we've got so many things happening in the world, and then you've got a recession, and you've got how do you make sure that your content is breaking through, or your engagements are the ones that they're prioritizing as well?
We're fairly well organized internally. We have a couple of different working groups that are formed to kind of prepare for different types of regulation. So when the SEC came out here in the US with the proposed climate disclosure rule, we immediately set up a cross-functional team with everyone that would need to be involved to prepare for mandatory climate disclosure within our financial reporting.
Mm.
Now that we see other types of initiatives coming on board, we're doing the same thing. We're getting organized internally, including those leaders that need to be aware of what's happening and trying to provide updates on emerging regulation in a way that's not, overwhelming, and also is like really tied to business risk.
If you think to like the structure that you have, what are some of the critical components of that getting ourselves internally organized? Like what are the key components of a good structure that allows you to get the work done?
Finding those champions within different functions is
Mhm.
really important to find, make friends, invite them to coffee and really talk about, how this is something that we all need to be doing together and the benefits at the end of the day.
So, if you think about like what are the skills that make you successful or allow for the greatest chance of success, what are the skills or tools that you think are really enabling you as an in-house professional?
Communication is
Mm.
key, and being able to communicate complex topics and complex data in a straightforward manner. Building awareness, building excitement and passion around these topics, because that brings us all together. And I would say, tying the work that we do to business values, that could be the return on investment for improving the operational efficiency of a building, investing in regenerative agriculture to create a new captive supply of sustainable raw materials, or linking sustainability KPIs to financial transactions.
How big is the team that you have supporting this work, and how do you structure them?
Currently, my team is organized by our areas of impact across our greenhouse gas inventory. So I have a team focused on minimizing the environmental impacts of our direct operations, so our distribution centers, retail stores, and corporate offices. I have another team that does that very similar work for our supply chain. So really thinking about decarbonizing our supply chain and looking for opportunities to minimize the environmental impacts across energy, water, wastewater, working in collaboration with our suppliers to help them understand how to measure impacts of their factories, and then also to look for opportunities, whether we can facilitate technical or financial resources to help them. And then finally, I think the biggest group that I have, the biggest team, is a combination of brand sustainability leads, but also a team that's really looking at that sustainable material substitution. So those folks collaborate with every team across the organization.
And then does each brand have their own sustainability function that is then underneath your umbrella, or is it underneath somebody else's and then you're bringing them together? How does that interplay work?
It's a bit of both. So our three largest brands, the North Face, Timberland, and Vans, each have a dedicated sustainability leader.
Mhm.
Those folks actually report up into my team. And the reason for that is that we have the opportunity to define cohesive strategy across all the brands, especially around materials, that we can allows us to move more quickly and be more agile and look for those bigger opportunities to scale. But
Mhm.
collectively, we all work together. So
Yeah.
there might be some dotted line reporting, but overall, we know that from a sustainability perspective, we are one organization, regardless of reporting lines, working together to identify the best opportunities to move toward our targets.
Going back to your team, when you're hiring people, what are you looking for in someone to come into the organization and deliver value through their function into this process that you've been building?
So having technical expertise is really important, especially having exposure to greenhouse gas accounting, to having a business sense, so understanding the corporate world. And I think having that sense of passion is really important too.
Mhm.
Increasingly understanding how governments and policy is created. And so that's incredibly important. And so I think it's a combination. Like what we look for in skills is, that technical background, ability to communicate, and the interpersonal, ability to create relationships and build relationships to be able to influence overall. But I think having that solid
Mm.
foundation in technical education is really important.
How do you look at education certifications as part of that?
So it's an interesting question because sustainability focused MBAs didn't even exist when I was back in school. And so I
Yeah.
think that's becoming a very, very common. So, I do notice those types of credentials if you have a sustainability focused MBA, but some
Mhm.
of those technical certifications are really important. And I think right now, some of the most important is having an understanding of LCA, life cycle analysis, and again, greenhouse gas accounting.
Should they be getting these on their own at night to skill up? Like, how should they be looking at their career going forward? And what should they be bringing in? Like, what have you learned over your career that you learned through the job? And what are some things that you learn? Like, I need to go outside and learn this on my own.
I think, building a sound foundation of knowledge around sustainability and, greenhouse gas accounting and some of those other certifications we mentioned earlier, GRI is another one. Having that foundation is great. But once you get into the workplace, I think that's when, in my experience, that's when I learned what else I needed to do to pursue additional sustainability certifications. And I
Mm.
continue to learn and educate myself and pursue new certifications as I see them come out. I think it's important for myself, even where I sit in my role, to stay relevant and keep the expertise up.
Last question. 2 or 3 tips for young professionals or students who are interested in developing a career in corporate sustainability.
Find a specialty to differentiate yourself early on and follow your passion. My early passion was around renewable energy and how to solve problems at the local level or challenges that can be solved with a technology that allows a community access to clean energy. So find something that really drives your passion. And then
Mm.
I think increasingly, look to see what's happening from a regulatory environment. There's a link between sustainability and finance is increasingly important, the link between sustainability and accounting. So if you have a skill that you already have developed, like accounting or finance,
Mm.
or some technical expertise, you can build that into what you're trying to accomplish as a sustainability professional. But
Mm.
I think at the end of the day, continue to follow your passion. This work is so important, and we need more and more sustainability professionals to really make this work move forward.